Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and speech writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Mark Wishnia, and we will be discussing the broadcasting industry. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure. And before we officially begin, I want to thank you. We tried this last week. We had technical problems, so I appreciate your coming back.
Not a problem. As far as everyone else is concerned, this is the first time we've ever spoken.
We'll keep that a secret. As we did last time that you just said we didn't do, please take a minute or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. So like you said, my name is Mark Wishnia. I currently work at CBS News. I have worked in the broadcast space pretty much my entire life. And fortunately, I have wanted to work in the broadcast space my entire life, so I'm doing what I want to do. My focus has mostly been in radio. I've worked in news radio, I've worked in music radio, I've worked in sports radio. I've been on the air, I've been behind the scenes, and I have noticed that I just love all aspects of the industry, whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's music, news, or sports, whether it's on air, whether it's off air, I love it all. And I'm always happy to help others who want to get into the industry as well.
Well, that's a good segue, because I'd like to begin with my career counseling cap, and then we'll get into broadcasting. And you were kind enough, and I'm going to share this with our viewers, you were kind enough to prepare a slide that shows your professional journey. How did you break into broadcasting?
Well, I'll give you the long story, I guess, because it's more interesting. And I think that'll help, because I think with the broadcast industry, like any other industry, it is helpful to know people. And if you don't know people, it's good to get out and introduce yourself to someone. So in the summer of 2011, I was an intern at the time at Westwood One Sports. And I had gotten to my internship early, and my supervisor wasn't in yet. And I was just browsing on the internet, just doing whatever, waiting for my supervisor to come in. And are you familiar with the iHeartRadio music festival in Las Vegas that they do every year?
Yes, I am.
So I was, in 2011, they had the first ever iHeartRadio music festival, which, I mean, nowadays it's still thrown by the same company, but at the time they weren't called iHeartMedia, they were called Clear Channel Radio. So I had seen, while I was waiting for my supervisor, I was just searching, and I saw that September, and this was in like July of 2011, and I saw that September there was this first ever iHeartRadio music festival. And they were going to have it was a 2-day festival, and they were having all these artists, and it was in Vegas. And I was thinking to myself, like, I really want to go to this thing. And I was reading about it, and then there were quotes in this article from the then president of Clear Channel Radio, and he was saying things about the radio business that resonated with me. And so I basically just wanted to reach out to this guy, because I was like, I want to work in radio. This guy is in charge of a company that is basically the biggest radio player in the United States. And he's saying things that make sense to me. So I wanted to get in touch with him. So I sent him an email randomly. I found his email address. randomly sent him an email, introduced myself. My name's Mark Wishnia. I'm going to be a senior at Penn State this year. I love radio. I was telling him some of the iHeart products that I enjoyed listening to, which to this day are still on the air that I enjoy, like Elvis Duran and Ryan Seacrest. And I was telling him that I really enjoyed it. And then I said, I see you guys are having this iHeartRadio music festival thing. Like, that sounds really cool. I hope it goes really well for you. It sounds awesome. And, I didn't really expect anything in return, because this guy is in charge of, 800 plus radio stations, and why does he care what I have to say? But it just so happened that a few days later, he emailed me back, and he said, "Thank you for your email. It was really nice." And he said, "I want to talk to you more, so schedule a time with my assistant to call me." So I was like, okay. So I did that, and I called him a few weeks later. It was actually the next month, because at this point I had this phone call with him when I was at school. He's a busy guy. But anyway, I ended up speaking to him in August, at the end of August, I believe. And, he said, "Mark, it was so great to read your email, tell me a little more about yourself." And I did. And he said, "Are you going to the iHeartRadio Festival?" And I said no. The only way to get tickets was either to win them from a radio station, which I had no idea that the concert was happening, or to buy them, which I think the tickets that are available for sale sell out within seconds. So he said, "Are you going?" I said, "No, I couldn't get tickets." And he goes, "Well, if I gave you 2 tickets, could you get down there? I'll pay for the festival and a hotel. You just have to fly down there." I said, "Absolutely. I'm in."
So you took your mother.
I took my brother.
Oh, brother.
I took my brother. And it was a few weeks, actually. The concert was a few weeks after I turned 21, so it was good timing.
We won't get into that.
I took my brother with me, who is 3.5 years older than I am, and we flew down.
And a divinity student.
Of course.
Thank you.
So we flew down to Vegas, and he had told me on the phone, he's like, "When you get down there, I'll meet up with you." And I was like, okay. But he never gave me like a time or a place or anything like that. So I was like, but whatever. He says he'll meet up with me, so I'll whatever. So anyway, I went down there and I picked up the tickets at a place that they had them, and enjoyed, an extended weekend in Vegas. And the second night of no problem. Second night of the concert, his assistant came to where I was sitting, because he knew where my seats were, because he gave me the tickets. And she said, "Who here is Mark?" And I said, "That's me." And she's like, "Oh, okay. Well, John would like to speak to you, for a few minutes." So I said, okay. So they brought me to like this area that was next to the stage where he was, and they had all this food and drinks. He said, "Help yourself." And we only chatted for a few minutes, but he's like, what are you looking to do? And I said, I'm hoping to work in radio. I graduate, this upcoming May. This was September. But yeah, I said, I love the radio business. I want to be in it. And he's like, "Okay, contact me again in January, and we'll see what we can do for you." So I'm like, okay. So I emailed him in January, and eventually I ended up getting in touch with someone named Daryl Parks, who at that time was the vice president of news talk operations for Clear Channel Radio. And also at that time, I was hosting the morning show on Penn State's college radio station. So, I was talking to him about what I wanted to do, and he was extremely nice. And he was telling me, every few weeks, he said, "Send me a full version of your morning show, take out the music and commercials." So that left it to be about an hour and a half or so of audio. And he said, "Send me the full show, and I'll critique it for you. And I'll critique you." It's not really the show, it's critiquing me. I said, "Great." And he actually would not listen to the audio prior to me calling him. He would listen to the audio when I called him through speakerphone, through his computer. And he would basically play it and stop it every few seconds and go, "Why'd you say this? You should say this, say it like this, say it like that." And he was really just coaching my on-air ability. He's completely free of charge. He had no obligation to do it. And like I said, it was an hour and a half of audio. So as he kept stopping it and critiquing me, I mean, these phone calls would last over 2 hours. And it wasn't once, it was every few weeks he was willing to do this. I mean, I had, I don't know, 10, 15 phone calls with him, and 2 hours long of him critiquing me. And then as we got...
He saw that you took his advice.
Correct. Yes. That's a big thing. But yes, he was giving me advice, and then obviously things sounded better. And then as it got to May, as I was graduating, late April, I guess, he was like, if you see any jobs you want, let me know. He's like, it doesn't have to be Clear Channel. We in the radio business kind of all know each other. If it's Clear Channel, it's great. But, if you see a job, let me know, and I'll see what I can do for you. So I was like, okay. So I saw a producer job at a news talk station in Davenport, Iowa. And my interest wasn't necessarily like news talk or news or anything in particular. I really wanted to be Elvis Duran. I wanted to have this like wacky morning show. That's what I was doing in college. But you got to break into the business however you can. And I was looking for producer positions and some on-air positions. But I saw the producer position in Davenport, Iowa, and a news talk station. And I said to Darryl, I said, I'm interested in this job. And he said, are you really interested in that job? Asking me for two reasons. One, it was in Davenport, Iowa, and I'm from Long Island, New York. And what New Yorker wants to move all the way to Davenport, Iowa? And two, he was like, I actually work very closely with this station. So if you are interested in this job, I know the program director very well. So, I can probably get you an interview. So I'm like, sure. Yeah, like I want this job. So he contacted the program director. I did the interview, and I, of course, got the job. But it all started, to go back to your question, which is how did you get started in the broadcast industry? Other than the fact that I was doing it in college and I did some stuff in high school as well. How did I get started professionally? I sent a random email to the then president of Clear Channel Radio, just telling him what I wanted to do. And he happened to get back to me, and that one email eventually, it essentially landed me a free trip to Vegas, and then it landed me a job just because of that one email that I sent. So I was very lucky.
You were. And you were lucky because you connected with a CEO who has a head on his shoulders.
Correct.
Because many would not have responded, but it's not all that unique. I had one career counseling client who went up after a presentation to the speaker, who was the head of the company, and started praising him. She said, I would really like to work for you. And it was the same thing. Contact my assistant. She's standing over there. Get her card. It does happen. So you have to get out of your comfort zone. I don't know if you're shy. I don't know if you're introverted. I like to use Johnny Carson as the example. Johnny Carson was extremely introverted, but he was Johnny Carson. The television came on, he was an extrovert. He did what everybody knows he did. But at a cocktail party, he would be a wallflower. He couldn't go over. I'm the same way. I'm very shy. I can do this. I can speak in front of hundreds of people. You put an EKG on me, I'm flatline. It doesn't bother me. But beforehand, if I have to go over to introduce myself to someone, my heart's beating a mile a minute. So I commend you for that. And I want to get into the evolution of the broadcast industry, because that's really our topic. But as a segue, what advice were you given at the beginning of your career that was helpful? And I'd also be curious about advice that you were given then that, because of the evolution of the industry, wouldn't be any good today.
Well, there's two pieces of advice that I received, both from the same guy, both very intelligent, somebody at Westwood One, that I have really took to heart. But one of the things that he told me, it's funny, he actually told me something that still is true, but it's also partially not as true anymore, in my opinion. The first thing he told me, and this is 100% true, and it shouldn't be taken the wrong way. But the first thing he told me, he said, is your grades do not matter. And I sort of knew that the whole time, but it is true. I mean, if you're in the broadcast industry, if you're on the air, you just have to be good at being on the air. They don't care that you got a B+ in biology. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. So that's the great thing about being in the broadcast industry, is that when you're in school, you have to pass and you have to go to your classes and you should study and do all those things. And by the way, I did get good grades, and my mother, she doesn't care if it matters or not. She would have been very upset with me if I didn't have good grades. So it's not like you can ignore a class. But he told me, listen, your grades don't matter. And basically what that means is if you want to be good at a particular craft within the broadcast industry, get good at that, focus on that. And, if you get a 92 on your test or a 79 on your test, most employers are not going to care either way. Certainly in your communications classes, you should do well. You should understand FCC restrictions. You should understand news ethics and things like that. But the other stuff doesn't matter. So that's true. The other thing he told me is, and it's partially true. The other thing he told me is he said, if you want to do something in particular, you have to take that path. So I wanted to be an on-air personality in radio, which I've been fortunate to do. And he told me, if you want to be on air, you've got to be on the air. And you've got to, move to small markets and be on the air. Because if you want to be on the air, you can't start part-time somewhere else, say in New York City, and you're, cutting tape or you're board opping or whatever. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to work your way on the air, because to be on the air, you need to have on-air experience. So if you're doing all this work that isn't on the air, how are you going to get on the air? You have no experience. And that's true. I mean, whatever you want to do. If you want to be a producer, go out and be a producer. If you want to be a board op, make sure you're running boards somewhere. And when I say board op, for those that aren't in radio, I'm talking about the guy that pushing the buttons to make sure that the microphone is on, and that if there's callers, that you bring them up. That's your board operator, short for board op. Nobody really wants to do that their whole life necessarily, but there are people that do and enjoy it, and that's fine. But he said, whatever you want to do that. And that's part of why I moved to Iowa and I lived in North Dakota, because for me to be on the air, you're not going to be on the air in New York City when you're first starting your career. It's just not going to happen. You can be on the air in small markets though, which I was. And so he said that, but the one thing that I don't like as much about that advice anymore, especially because I was really, really focused on being on the air. And, if you're like amazing, it's probably going to work out for you. Not that I'm not amazing, but I'm not like amazing. But the truth of the matter is the broadcast industry, and I'm sure you hear about it all the time, or really just media in general, there's layoffs. I mean, there just are. The media business is trying to catch up with an ever-changing world and the way people consume anything. I mean, whether it's a TV show or news or sports or whatever, people are just consuming it in different ways. The media is trying to keep up. They're fighting for advertising dollars with a million different streaming platforms and whatever, websites. And there's just layoffs. And I would, I'm sure it's true for a lot of other industries too, but I mean, the amount of people that I know that have been laid off multiple times, myself included, I've been laid off twice in my life. It happens. And I think it's helpful if you want to continue to work in the industry, it's helpful to know as much about the industry as possible. So if you just focus on air, in my opinion, and you don't know how to do anything else, well, then when you lose a job, yeah, you can wait for another on-air opportunity to come along, obviously, but you might be out of a job longer at that point. And I think it's easier to stay afloat if you know as much as possible and can do as much as possible. And that includes all the other things that surround broadcast. So not just being a producer and knowing how to book guests or knowing how to run a board, or knowing how to, be on the air. And then obviously if you're doing TV, knowing how to run a camera, knowing how to produce that, whatever it is, in addition to all of that, I mean, you really, it helps you get a job if you get laid off. I mean, because there's just more positions available for you to apply for. And so I think it's important to know everything. And in addition to that, sorry, I had lost my train of thought there, but also know, if you can, try to learn Photoshop so you can do things with images for social media, or, other things, know how to manage a website, know what the back end of a website looks like. So that way you can, if you wanted to be a digital manager for a, company, whatever it is, it's good to know as much as you possibly can. And I don't necessarily think now it's a great idea to just focus only on what you want to do, because the way that, the cards fall, you may not end up having the opportunity to do what you want to do if you want to, make money in some capacity and stay afloat and be able to pay your bills.
It sounds like the old advice that I was given: start in the mailroom and work your way up. And that way there, all the jobs, so that when you get to a senior place and you tell somebody, I need this done, you don't say, I need it done in 10 minutes, because you've done that job and it can't be done in 10 minutes, but you do know it can be done in half an hour. And that can be critical, because you're not demanding expectations that are unreasonable.
Right.
Now, when I was growing up, news was television. You'd listen to the radio in the car, which is still true in many ways.
Very much.
But you would watch Walter Cronkite, or Chet Huntley and David Brinkley, or Howard K. Smith, and whatever they told you, you'd believe it. These were the days when journalists had to have 3 sources for every story, and it was simple. Today, it's different. There are no more Walter Cronkites. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but
there could be people. There all are Walter Cronkites, but people, it's harder for them to notice that they're there because there's so much other noise.
I mean, I watch Fox. I like Brett Baer. I trust him. And one of the reasons that I trust him is if he makes a mistake, within minutes, he'll apologize and he'll correct it. And if it's not caught, and I mean, sometimes it's funny. He'll get tongue-tied the way I'm sure you do. God knows the way I do. Instead of saying a million, he'll say a trillion, or vice versa, and that'll get caught. But if there's a factual error of significance, he within 24 hours, it's correct. And I like that. But what is broadcast today? Is this what we're doing right now, broadcast? Because if all goes well this time, not like that last time, and this downloads properly in formats, and then I can upload it to YouTube, the world can see it. And as you were going back to what you were saying before, you get laid off and you're a behind the camera guy. You can be the best at that, but nobody's ever heard of you. If you are an on camera or on microphone guy, you probably have your own following, and then you can start your own podcast, and then who knows what'll happen.
Right.
So talk to us now about the evolution of the broadcast industry.
Sure. So your original question is what we're doing right now, broadcasting. Essentially, yeah. I mean, we're taking a video, we're posting it online, and essentially broadcasting it to the world. So yeah, the broadcast industry has evolved significantly in that sense, and anyone could go on and make a YouTube video, and anybody could go on and make a podcast. And that's kind of the difference. When I say anyone can do this, anyone can do that, it's true. Anyone can do it. It's not difficult. Even just the video on your cell phone or the microphone on your cell phone, you can use that to make your videos and podcasts. So anyone can do it. But there's still professional broadcasting, and then there's amateur broadcasting. Now there's people that do things on YouTube, and there's people that do podcasts, and they are phenomenal. They do a great job. They could be making their living from it. So essentially they are doing it professionally. But I feel like you're not really a professional broadcaster, so to speak, until either a noted company hires you or people generally agree that you are just, a professional broadcaster. But it's interesting because people who are YouTubers or podcasters are called that. They're not called broadcasters. They say this person's a professional YouTuber, professional podcaster, and there's a reason for that. And that's because they're the same, but they're different. And, one thing that I've noticed, because a lot of people that do things on YouTube and on podcasts are awful. I mean, they are terrible. But some of those people have been doing it for 10 years. Some of those people have millions of followers, and these people believe that they are phenomenal broadcasters, but they are not. If they ever were to send their podcast audio to, a radio program director, it's possible they'd get hired if they have 20 million followers, because that would help the radio station. But if they were being honestly critiqued, they'd be like, this is awful. You don't know what you're doing. And that happens a lot. So, I feel like there's a false sense sometimes from certain people that because they do something and they do it for a long time and nobody tells them they're doing it wrong, they go, I'm a professional broadcaster. I've had a podcast for 10 years. I have 20 million listeners. I'm amazing at it. And it's like, well, you may have great content and great guests and things like that, but your skill set as a broadcaster, doing segues, getting to the point quickly, you stink. You're awful at it. So, there's a lot of kind of amateur broadcasting out there that you kind of have to filter through to know what's good and what's not good. But yeah, I mean, obviously things have evolved a lot. A lot of things are online. People are consuming content in a lot of different ways. You talked about the Walter Cronkites of the world, and, the truth of the matter is there's people that make YouTube videos now and they go, I know that you believe this, but actually, according to this study and this study and this study and this guy you've never heard of and this guy you've never heard of and this guy you never heard of, they say this, 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 and this. It all sounds very convincing. And you're like, oh my God, like these people on the news are lying. How come they're not talking about this? And listen, there's videos online that make a fairly somewhat convincing argument that the earth is flat. It's not, but they make these arguments where if you're not really thinking about it too much, you're not questioning what these people are telling you, you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like the earth is flat, 100%.
Can I tell you something? Given what's behind you on the wall, you're arguing about the earth not being flat just doesn't seem to hold much water.
Well, that is a map. Maps are flat. The earth is not.
I was given one piece of advice. I was given two pieces of advice. The first one is not really relevant. It was the gentleman who hired me, for lack of a better word, to be the host of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce podcast, called me up and said, Bruce, you're umming and humming too much. And I said, well, how do I stop that? And he said, you shut up. If you don't know what you're going to say, don't say anything. Silence is better than The second piece of advice was always remember you're the host. It's your job to make the guest the star, and the show has to be either informative or entertaining, or both, preferably both.
Right.
Final question. What haven't I asked you that you wish I had asked you? What would you like to tell
Well, I'm glad you asked. I would say the most important thing is networking. And I would also say, especially because of the story that I told at the beginning, is don't be afraid to reach out to people, because people want to help. Most people in the broadcast space have had people help them, and people like to pay it forward. And it's for any industry. I mean, in any industry, someone has had anyone help them, and people like to help. I think, a lot of people don't think about it themselves, but I think, if somebody came up to you and said, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. You're really good at this. Like, do you have any advice? Is there anything you could do to help me? You might think to yourself, yeah, like if somebody came up to me and asked me that, I'd love to help them. And people think that, oh, well, this guy, he's the president of 800 radio stations, so he doesn't feel that way. Or this guy is, whatever. He's got a big TV show. He does whatever. You go, he's not going to help me. And it's true. It might be true. He might not, or she might not want to help you. But it's also possible that they will. And just one quick thing is, when I was in high school, I started what I then called an internet radio show, because the word podcast wasn't really a thing, but it was live. It was through Blog Talk Radio, which I believe you're familiar with. Sure. So I did an internet radio show about New York sports in high school through Blog Talk Radio, which, for those who don't know, is a platform where you can go and broadcast. And it, unlike a podcast where you can download it whenever, what you can do through Blog Talk Radio, it says that you can download it whenever, but it has a time that you can broadcast, similar to a TV show or a radio show, and you tune in and you can listen live and take callers, which podcasts don't do. And we were able to take callers. But anyway, I did a show about New York sports. And on that show, and I was in high school, I wanted guests to talk about New York sports. And I had a lot. I mean, I had a lot of like newspaper writers, which they're generally easier to book, newspaper writers, but I had people from the New York Post and from Newsday, local papers in New York, to talk about that. But I also had, I had Kenny Albert on, who people may know from Fox Sports, who does the MLB and the NFL on Fox. He's the Rangers radio broadcaster. I had Mike Emmerich on, who's the lead broadcaster for the NHL. It was then OLN and then Versus and now NBC Sports. I had Darrelle Revis on, who was then a player for the New York Jets. I had Ryan Callahan, who was then a player for the New York Rangers. I had Marian Gaborik, who was then a player for the New York Rangers. I had all these people as guests on my show. I was a high school student. I was nobody. When I emailed people and I said, hello, I'm Mark Wishnia, and I host an internet radio show about New York sports, the person on the other end of the email had no clue in the world who I was, which is still the case today if I were to email these people. And that they came on. I was able to get them. Did people say no? Yes. Did people not respond? Yes. But some people are just willing to help you out. And, I emailed these people's agents, the players. I emailed their agents. I didn't care. These people are negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts with these GMs. I'm a high school student, but I reached out. I got them as guests. They were willing to help out. And obviously, when I emailed the president of Clear Channel Radio at the time, he also was willing to help me out. He passed me on to another individual who was also willing to help me out. People are willing to help, and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to people. So if you want something, send an email. There, you have nothing to lose. They either say no, don't answer, or say yes. And if they do the first two, don't answer or say no, you're in the same position that you were. So what's the difference? And if they say yes, awesome.
Awesome. Mark, I want to thank you. And before I let you go, please tell our listeners or viewers how to get in touch.
Simplest way to email me, you can see there, mark@markwishnia.com. And then I'm on all the social platforms. You go to markwishnia.com. You can see more about me there. And there's not a whole lot of Mark Wishnias in the world. So if you just Google Mark Wishnia, all the stuff is there. And I'm not afraid of you Googling Mark Wishnia. Nothing embarrassing has happened. I have no criminal history. I have nothing like that. So go ahead, Google my name. It's all good. And my information is out there. It's everywhere. It's not hard to get a hold of me.
Mark, thank you very much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. You've provided a wealth of information for our viewers, and I know they appreciate it as well. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and please keep focused on success.